they said you are the highest moneymaker Mafia boss outside of Al Capone. You were making 6 to 8 mil a week.
I never aspired to be a made man. I was 17 years old when my dad drew a 50-year prison sentence. My best friend was walking me into a room, but the setup was bad. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I might have gotten killed that night.
So there's a lot of people I sit down with and I meet, but Michael, I have to tell you, you're one of the most fascinating people that I've been looking forward to sitting down with.
And you had Nicky Eyes.
What's up, guy?
And Mikey Franzese.
That guy, yeah, I want to see him.
When you hear about the modern day, not even a modern day, you know the movie Godfather, everybody has the poster, and you watch the movie and you hear about Michael Corleone and you think, is there really a character like that? You pretty much are the real life Michael Corleone per se of that story, right? So it's exciting to be sitting down with you. Appreciate you for making the time and welcoming us to your place here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I have been compared, obviously, to Michael. I think it's a good comparison at times because Al Pacino, he played a terrific role in that movie.
Yeah, and there is a certain flow that I watch in the movie with him and I see with you where the mannerisms, it's amazing how close that is with the mannerisms that you have on the way you speak. So let's get right into it. If you don't know Michael Franzese, let me give you some stats. Here's the best way to open it up so you'll know who we're sitting down with. So in 1986, Fortune magazine, November 10th, Fortune magazine does an article saying the 50 biggest mafia bosses, right? And when you go through this, the part in here that's fascinating to me is the following. They have you down on 18th place, right? And then they had John Gotti at 13. So you look at this and you say, well, you're 18, Gotti is 13, and then you have Anthony Salerno at first, and you have some of these other names, Persico, Carmine Persico, who you work with very closely for many years, Salvatore Santoro, some of these names that people know about. The part that I looked at, Michael, there's not a single person on this list where their age starts with the number 3 except for you. Gotti was 46, you were 35. So we're not just talking about somebody who made it to the high level of the Colombo family, the 5 families, the Colombo family yourself. You did it at 35 years old. How was it being raised into that environment and that family?
I would say I had a good role model as far as my dad being a real person of substance in that life. And I love my father. He was everything to me growing up, and he was an important figure there. And it's not that I tried to emulate him, Patrick, because I never thought I would be part of that life growing up. I had different thoughts. I was an athlete. I was going to school. I was going to be a doctor. But once I made a decision to get into that life, I had, as far as I was concerned, the best guy in the world to model myself after, and that was my dad. I learned a lot from him.
Directly watching all the things that was taking place.
Yeah, just the way he carried himself, the way people respected him, the respect that he had for my mother and my sisters, and just the way he carried himself, And he was a man's man. And, from the time I was 5 years old, my father drummed it into my head, Michael, you have to be a man's man. That's the standard in life you have to live up to. He, in many ways, formed the person that I became later on in life.
He had so much street credit that you can tell if somebody did something to you and they knew who your dad was, there was a line, like you couldn't mess with it. How was it being raised in that environment?
Well, it was different. I always tell the story. I was an athlete, and baseball was really my sport, and my dad would never miss a game, no matter what he was doing, mob business, legit business. I'd be playing ball, he'd show up. He'd always come to the field late, and he'd pull up in a big black Cadillac or a black Lincoln. He'd get out of the car dressed sharp in a suit, and he'd always have 5 or 6 guys with him because he never traveled alone. And I'd be up to bat, and they'd walk out on the field, and the umpire would take one look at him and never call strike 3 on me. So, it had its advantages, being Sonny Francese's son. He was just a great father, and obviously I knew there was something different about him, but my dad never spoke about it in the house.
Really?
Never.
So you didn't really know fully what was taking place?
Never from him. I knew because he was such a high-profile figure that we lived in an environment where law enforcement was around us all the time. And he was under surveillance from 5 or 6 different agencies, from the feds right down to all the state and locals. So they would park cars around our house and follow us wherever we went. And you know, I viewed them at that time as the enemy because I viewed my dad as my hero. And so I knew who he was. I obviously read the papers. He had a lot of press. And I observed things, but never from his mouth. He would never bring it into the house. In the house, we were just a family. That didn't exist.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
There are 6 areas I'd like to touch up on here with you. One is story on how that life was. 2, how the game, because you wrote a book, I'll Make You an Offer You Cannot Refuse, the game between what you had to experience and how similar that is on the corporate side. I think there's a lot to be learned from the entrepreneurs who watch this. How to identify a consigliere. I really want to stay on that because what it means to be a consigliere, how do you identify it? It's a very fascinating way you talk about it in the book. Human nature, you know, how do you read through the BS and how do you read through some people that are trying to take advantage of you? What are some of the things that you saw? And then some side questions about characters and then some fun questions at the end that we'll go through. So why don't we get into it as far as when you knew and you said, I want to get in, how did you get into the whole, you know, family, I want to become a made man? How did that whole experience take place with you?
You know, Patrick, I never aspired to be a made man. You know, I was on a different path in life, but I was 17 years old when my dad drew a 50-year prison sentence and went off to serve his federal time. And I sat with my dad. I visited him in the federal jail before they shipped him off to the penitentiary. And he said to me, Michael, I'm innocent. I didn't commit this crime. He was alleged to have masterminded a nationwide string of bank robberies. He said, I never knew the witnesses. I'm not a bank robber. The witnesses were all drug addicts, junkies. And one thing I knew, my dad hated anything to do with drugs. My whole life he preached against drugs. He would make up stories about drug addicts to scare me never to take drugs. So I knew he would never bother with people like this. So I believed him. And when he went away, Joe Colombo, the boss of our family, who we were close with, he kind of took me under his wing because my dad was his underboss. And I started to meet a lot more of my dad's friends, you know, and they were influencing me. Mike, you know, what are you doing going to school? I was a pre-med student at that time. Shortly after that. You know, if you don't help your father out, he's going to die in prison. So I went to see him in Leavenworth and I said, Dad, I'm not going to school. You're going to die in here if I don't help you. He didn't want that. I mean, he kind of argued, no, I want you to go to school, get an education. I said, Dad, it's too late. My mind is made up. And he said to me, he said, if you're going to be on the street, then I want you on the street the right way. In his mind, the right way was to become a member of his life. And he proposed me at that point for membership into the life. And you know the interesting thing, Pat? My father, even at that point, never told me what the life was about. Because, you know, you're not supposed to talk about that life with anybody outside of it. And he wouldn't violate that policy, even with me, his own son. My dad's a good soldier. He just said, go home, somebody will be in touch with you, do whatever you're told. It was kind of on-the-job training. And 2 weeks later, I sat with the boss, and you know, he ran things down for me and told me what to expect. And for the next year and a half, I was kind of a recruit, where I kind of learned the life, how to do anything I was told to do to prove myself worthy. And then Halloween night, 1975, is when I was formally inducted into that life.
You remember it vividly?
Vividly, yeah.
And what was that process like? Was there a ritual? Was there an experience you had to go through?
Very, very solemn ceremony, very serious. 6 of us walked into a room individually towards midnight that night. It was a very secure setting, obviously. I walked into a room, the boss was seated at the head of like a horseshoe configuration, the underboss and the Conciegliere to his left and right, and all of our capo regimes or captains were alongside of them. And I walked down the aisle, stood in front of the boss. I held out my hand. He took a knife right here, cut my finger. Some blood dropped on the floor. This is a blood oath. I cupped my hands. He took a picture of a saint, Catholic altar card, put it in my hands and lit it aflame. It didn't hurt. It burned quickly. It was just symbolic. And he said, tonight, Michael Franzese, you are born again into a new life, into La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. Violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers, and you will die and burn in hell like the saint is burning in your hands. Do you accept? Yes, I do. And that's it. That's the ritual. It's
Wow.
short and sweet, but extremely serious.
Now, there was 6 of you.
6 of us. We went in individually. You take it alone.
Got it. And then out of these 6, apparently you're the only one that's alive.
They're all dead.
They're all dead.
Not one of them died in natural causes. Every one of them were murdered.
Wow. So why are you still here? You know, because if you read the story and you put yourself out there, and it's not like you went and you you ratted people out or you became an informant. There's nothing there that people will say, even some of the guys that were upset that you stepped away, they don't call you informant. They just say, you know, it's impressive to see that he was able to make it and we're proud of him. Even some of your enemies are saying good things about you. How was that process for you? You never hear somebody survive when they leave the family. How did that happen with you?
Well, you know, Patrick, I didn't have any grand plan because there's no blueprint to walk away from that life, not enter a program and survive. And, you know, I'm only saying this because it's a fact. I don't know of anybody else that has done that successfully, especially at the level that I reached, because I was at a pretty high level. You know, I didn't know how it was going to work out. I knew that when I walked away, people were going to be very upset. You don't walk away from that life. You're not allowed to renounce it. And I had a lot of trouble as a result. But, you know, for me, there's two sides of this. There's a spiritual side, obviously. I'm a person of faith. And the bottom line for me is I believe God had a different plan and a purpose for my life. And over the past 20 years, I've seen more evidence of that, and I'm very secure with that. It's God's plan. But aside from that, you know, I realized that God never throws you into the fire without preparing you first. So I spent 20 years in that life at a very high level, and I was a good student of the life. I observed and I watched, and I reached a certain level there. So I knew I had to make changes. You know, one of the horrors about that life, and I don't know if you know this, but you might be in trouble, in serious trouble. Your best friend walks you into a room, you don't walk out again. And unfortunately, I've experienced that in my life with other people. And so I said, okay, they're not gonna walk me into a room. They're gonna have to work to get me. I moved out of New York. I would have never made it in New York. I moved way out across the country to California. It's one thing to try to walk somebody into the room. It's another thing to send a hit squad to try to get somebody who knows what's going on. And I never put a house in my name, no utilities. I never went to any nightclubs. Bad place for me. I know who hangs out there. Somebody sees me, they make a call to New York, they want to be a hero. I walk in the parking lot, boom, I'm gone. I stopped creating patterns in my life. I never went to the same restaurant every Tuesday night. I never walked my dog every morning at 7 o'clock. So if somebody was scoping me, they had a tough time in figuring out where I was. And I was very disciplined in that, very disciplined, because I never sell my former associates short. There's very capable guys there. And then what happened, I just outlasted everybody. I mean, who went to jail, who got killed? We had a big war in our family in the early 90s. About 13 guys got killed. Another 20 or something went to jail for life. And I just outlasted everybody. And you know, the major thing for me was that I never testified against anybody. I didn't send anybody to prison. I didn't put anybody in trouble. Had I done that, it would have been a lot worse. It would have been a lot worse because some people had personal feelings against me. Because when I left, you know, look, I was making a lot of money. A lot of people were earning with me. And when you shut that off, people get upset. And they resented that, you know, especially my boss at the time. But the fact that I didn't hurt anybody over a period of time, that really went in my favor. And listen, you know, there's no guarantees. You know, I'm still careful when I go to certain places.
Still till today?
Oh, yeah.
Really? So the level of paranoia is not gone?
It's not paranoia, and you know, it's not a macho thing. I don't want you to think that, but I just feel very secure. But, you know, look, God doesn't tell you to be stupid. I can't go back to Brooklyn and say, hey guys, I'm moving back into the neighborhood. You know, it'd be like thumbing my nose in their face. So I don't do that. But, you know, listen, I'm a speaker. I'm out in front of thousands of people every week. I've signed books for hundreds of people. I don't know who's on that book line. You know, you never know. You know, I'm not a kid anymore. You know, God has blessed me with good things in my life, and I think I'll be around for a while longer. But if not, I mean, what could you do? I mean, that's how I look at things.
It seems, Michael, that you're very resolved. I mean, when speaking to you, there's none of it that you're uncomfortable, which is fascinating. But talking about numbers, I don't know if everybody really knows what kind of numbers you were bringing in. The numbers I read about, you were making 6 to 8 mil a week, 6 to 8 million per week, and you were selling $500 million of gas per month. And they said you are the highest money maker Mafia boss outside of Al Capone. I mean, there's a lot of people that are making money with you. How did that happen?
People think that mob guys sit around in their social clubs and we start to target different businesses. Well, we're going to take that over, we're going to do this. Normally it doesn't happen that way. What happens is people come to us. People would come to me with all sorts of deals. And it was mostly guys that came inside their company that had a way to make some money, and they figured they can do it with me. I can protect them, I can finance them, we have strength, you know, all that. And that's how this happened in the gas business. Some guy came to me, had a very small gasoline operation, and he said, you know, I have a way to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. It was attractive to me because at that time I didn't like the government. And you know, my targets back then were always bigger companies. I didn't go after small stuff.
The list of companies I see, I'm like, you didn't go after small.
No, I didn't go after small. I figured the ones that can afford it, no problem. And the government was a huge company. So what happened, he had a couple of other wise guys that were kind of trying to extort him in his business. And I was able to solve that for him. And then we went into business together, and I'll tell you how it happened. I put somebody with him because I didn't know him that well, and I said, I'm going to put this fellow with you. We're going to see exactly what you got going on, and we'll try to figure this out. Well, the guy I put with him was a butcher. He was my butcher. Big guy, had a scar across the top of his head. Big Vinny, we called him. So he's coming to every Saturday. He would bring meat to my house, right? So this Saturday he pulls up, and he's got this big box on his shoulder. And I said, what are you doing with all that meat? Are we having a party or something? I don't know about it. He says, hey, Chief, it ain't meat. I said, what is it? He said, come on in the kitchen. We go in the kitchen. He puts the box down. He opens it up, $280,000. He said, that's the first week's take in the gas business. And long story short, he really got my attention at that point. I grew that 280 into, at times, almost $8 million a week.
Per week?
Per week, yeah. And basically, you know, devised a scheme, built upon what that little germ of an idea that he had. And we were defrauding the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. It was 20 to 40 cents, depending where you were located. The government couldn't figure it out. We had a very efficient scheme put together, and they just couldn't figure it out. We were always one step ahead of them.
And is this part of the whole RICO story, which was, you know, kind of linked to that, where corporation after corporation after corporation, and then the last one you would file a bankruptcy, and this was figured out on how to avoid paying the taxes, which allowed you to kind of compete against your marketplace. So you had guys that were buying 1 million gallons, all of a sudden they're buying 2, 3, then they're doing 10 million gallons from you, and you're one of the biggest vendors to them.
Patrick, we would...
and you're not even Middle Eastern or from Texas. You know, you're Italian doing this.
I had probably 300 gas stations. We had branded and unbranded stations. And what we would do is, let's say it was a mobile station, I'm just picking that out, because we dealt with all of them. And we go to a station and say, how much are you paying for a gallon of gas? They say, oh, I'm paying $1. Now, how would you like to pay 95 cents? Now, 5 cents is a big saving for them. I said, great. I said, I'll tell you what you do. How many loads a week are you getting from mobile? Oh, we're getting 6. All right. Buy 3 from them, buy 3 from us. We'll deliver in the middle of the night, we'll save you that. By the end of the day, they wanted us to service them all. They didn't want to buy anything from mobile anymore. I said, you can't do that. You got to keep your brand. Nobody can compete with us. And if we bought a couple of gas stations, like I remember one incident, there were 4 gas stations on a corner, big ones. Mm-hmm. We bought one of them, and I went to the other 3 and I said, now here's the deal. I said, I'm going to be the lowest guy on the corner. I said, if you sell for 95, I'm going to sell for 92. If you sell for 92, I'm going to go down to 80 until I put you all out of business. So let's keep it at a certain level, and we don't have to compete.
You told them that, so there was a regulated number that we're doing with, so no one's...
I said, if you guys stay at this number, you'll be fine. If you try to compete with me, I'm going to knock you out, because you can't compete with me. And pretty soon they were all buying from me anyway. There'll never be anything like that again.
I don't know if I read this or I saw you talk about it, where one of the guys you did business with, was this the oil guy who for 8 years tracked everything that you were doing, who was actually the guy that ended up becoming the informant that gave the information out that, you know, stopped the entire operation?
Yeah, he was my partner. He's passed away now. We never had an ill word in 7 years that we were together. My kids called him Uncle Larry, his kids called me Uncle Michael. But the whole time I was his meal ticket, because he knew if he ever got in trouble that I was the guy that they would want. So he kept a diary on me. He testified against me in one case, a big case where Rudy Giuliani indicted me, and I was acquitted. So the jury still didn't believe him.
You're making all the family's money now. They're all kind of happy about you, but at the same time, you know, you're there as well. What happened when all of a sudden you were growing a little too fast? What kind of threats did you start seeing at that point? Were there some people that were power people saying, wait a minute, I don't like this guy having this much power?
Yeah, you know what happened? I had a couple of things against me. Number one, I was a younger guy. And the older guys tend to resent you. You know, you're young, you're doing all this, you're making all this money. And that comes with the territory. You can't help that. You try to deal with it as best you can. You know, you're not flaming that fire, so to speak, but it happens. And then, you know, I had teamed up with the Russians. I had all the Russian mob guys in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, were all my partners, and they were a pretty big crew. And I think it was Newsday, a publication out in Long Island, had written a story that I was becoming so powerful I was going to break away from the Colombos and start my own family. No truth to it whatsoever. It was like a fairy tale, fiction, made up. But it got into people's heads. And, you know, my boss started to question some of the Russian guys. You know, some things started to happen like that. And I knew it, so I was on my guard about it. You know, my father and I discussed it. My dad was always in and out of jail on parole. So when he was out, we talked about these things. But I knew I had to watch myself. You know, it comes with the territory.
What was the one event that happened where you're kind of like, listen, I got to start taking a look at what's going on with me? Was it Joey Colombo's story? Was it the Castellano, what Gotti did to him? Or what was it where you're like, listen, I'm going to start paying a little bit more attention on what's going on in the marketplace right now?
You know, it wasn't that. It was an incident that I had personally with my boss when they basically walked me into that room and really put me on the hot seat. Because there was a story that said that I had stole $2 billion from the government, and I'm handing the family $2 million a week. So, I mean, I got questioned, you know, they were saying, $2 billion, Michael. I said, hey, my answer was, when they write about everybody else, it's a lie. When they're writing about me, all of a sudden it's the truth. I said, come on, man, I'm giving you guys all this money. You don't have to do anything. I'm taking care of everything, you know. I put nobody in trouble. Nobody's on the line here. If anybody goes down, it's going to be me and my crew. I said, well, what's going on here? You know, so I got a little upset about it. And then I was talking to the boss, and you don't lose your head with the boss, but I got a little angry, and then I had to tone myself down a little bit, you know. But that put me on the alert. I said, you know, I got to really watch myself here because, you know, mistakes here you pay dearly for in life. And it kind of just, like I said, put me really on my guard. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I thought I might have gotten killed that night. You know, the setup was bad. My best friend was walking me into a room. It was a room in Brooklyn. I'll be honest with you. You know, I had to walk out of the car and into that house and that basement apartment. It was probably a 30-yard walk. That was either the longest or the shortest walk of my life. Yeah, I mean, as I speak now, I can hear the crickets chirping, and I can remember the smell of the flowers.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because you know, Patrick, I learned something. When you think you're going to meet your maker, and I wasn't a religious guy at that point, you start to pray. And I was nervous. I tried not to show it because I said, hey, if this is it, this is it. You kind of get conditioned in that life. But yeah, that was the night, and I didn't appreciate it.
Years later now, because you hear stories that your father was involved and he wasn't involved. How do you feel about that whole situation? Where was your dad really kind of saying, let's find out if Michael is really making this money and I'm not, you know, we're not getting a piece of it? How did you respond to that at that time?
I think my dad kind of threw me under the bus a little bit that night. He, you know, he went in separately, and I was told that he didn't defend me. He just kind of backed off and said, hey, if my son is stealing, he does everything. I don't do anything. I'm on parole. He handles everything. And
were you guys on bad terms at that time?
No, we were on great terms.
Wow.
And it really hurt, you know, because I said, man, it kind of gave me really pause, because I said, you know, if this life can separate father and son, what do we really have here? I never said anything to him, because, you know, again, in that life, you learn to keep things quiet until the right time. And but it really put me on notice that I got to really be careful. I was very disappointed in him. It didn't change my love for him or anything, but I was really disappointed. It really hurt.
How do you, from a moment like that, that's a big scar. This is a man that grew up. You need to be a man's man from 5 years old. You know, he's shaping you into who you are, and he's coming to your games. He's always at your game. How do you, from that moment, trust anybody else and not believe that, you know, at some moment somebody could turn on me? Is that the faith part that completely changed it, that brought the peace?
It did. You know, I understand my father. I know he's really a product of that life. And I kind of understood, even though I didn't appreciate it. I knew my dad still loved me. It wasn't anything like that. It's very hard to explain to anybody else. Like, even my wife has a real problem with this. And she says, you know, how do you forgive that? I used to tell her, you know, don't worry about it. It's okay. And, you know, we have this special bond between us, and I understand the life. I'm a product of it too. But it was still disappointing, because I would have never done that to him. But I'll tell you what, I almost thank him for it now. Because I'll tell you this, Patrick, I met my wife 2 years after that. And that's when I made the decision to walk away from that life. But if this incident didn't happen with my dad, I don't think I would have ever walked away.
Wow.
I think that was God's way of separating me from this bond or this hold that my dad had on me. So I look back and I said, actually, it was a good thing, because I don't think I would have walked away.
It's amazing how you process it that way. I mean, I don't know who can sit there and go through that and not think of it a different way, but the way you're processing is the man that did this to give your life maybe a second chance type of a situation. Very interesting. So, and now he's 100 years old. You know, you were telling me, you know, he had a surgery recently. He's doing good. He's still sharp. He thinks he's going to live a long time, which is great.
He still talks to me like I'm part of that life. I mean, he's unbelievable.
Is he still reminiscing and telling old stories? You remember Michael? Or?
Yes. You know, I always say this. Look, my dad did a lot of rough things in his life. So did I. I went to jail for a crime that I was guilty of. But, you know, that particular crime that he did 38 years in prison for, he was innocent of. And I'll take that to my grave.
Really?
Oh, 100%. I investigated that case, spoke to every witness. They recanted their testimony. We gave them lie detector tests, proved they lied at the trial. The FBI was complicit in turning them against my dad. It was a bad case. He was framed, 1,000%. People say, well, you know, he got away with so much. Mm-hmm. That's not how our system's supposed to work. They have enough tools and weapons, the government, to get people the right way. They're not supposed to do that, no matter what or who you are. Because if they do it against the bad guys, one day they can do it against the good guys if it suits them. So I always tell people, look, you wouldn't want my dad's life in the last 50 years. That man suffered. He did 38 years in prison. My sister died of an overdose of drugs while he was away. My brother was a drug addict. My brother actually turned against my father, went into the witness protection program and testified against him and got him thrown back in jail. My kid brother. I mean, my father was destroyed over that. Wow. You know, my mom passed away in the last years before she passed away. I can only describe their relationship as ugly, because she blamed him for everything. You know, 33 years without a husband, she blamed him for everything that went down. So, I mean, the guy suffered tremendously. And I have a real heart for that. You know, I love my dad, and we've patched things up, you know. It's amazing how, you know, people said I'd never have a relationship with him again, that, you know, when I walked away, and God has brought it full circle. And I found out one thing, Patrick, you have to give children want to love their parents. You got to give them a real reason not to love their parents.
Powerful.
Absolutely. I'm just thankful that we have this relationship again.
So Sparks Restaurant's famous for, you know, Paul Castellano is where he got shot outside by John Gotti and that whole relationship. How was Paul Castellano? Was he really just a money business guy?
I knew Paul. I didn't know him well because he was a boss. I was young at that time, but I was in his company quite a bit, and I did have an incident with him. And quite honestly, you know, the word on him on the street was not great. I don't think he had a lot of real friends on the street, especially in the other families. I know in our family they didn't talk well about him. More of a business guy, you know, that kind of a thing. I think people think that maybe he didn't earn the position that he had because he was so close to Carlo, and Carlo gave him that spot. You know, it went down with Gotti. I mean, it was either him or Gotti at that point, and John made the move. And, you know, in our life, there's no election process. You know, if you're going to take over, you're going to take over the hard way. You don't rival a boss and look for votes. You rival a boss by eliminating him. You know, look, money is always at the root of just about everything there. You know, if you're good, you make people earn, people like you. That's the bottom line, you know, and if they don't like you, they'll tolerate you because you're earning with them. But he was kind of known to be a greedy guy, and he didn't fit the profile of the real mob boss in a way, you know. Gotti doesn't make that move on his own. He kind of solicits people, hey, what do you think? He tries to get some support, that if this were to happen, you know, how are people going to react? So he kind of knew how it was going to work out if he took him out.
Every time you had a run-in with him, you've had obviously many run-ins with him, you've done a couple sit-downs with him. How was Gotti like, personality-wise? Why did he have this, you know, larger-than-life story, and nowhere near the kind of money you brought him? What made him that special?
Well, you know, he fit the Hollywood profile, so to speak. I mean, he had the look, he had the mannerisms. You know, one thing I will say about John, I happen to like him. You know, socially, a lot of fun. We would go in a club, a lot of fun. I mean, he was a good guy to be around. Business, he didn't really understand business. And it was a nightmare dealing with him in that respect, because the one thing about Gotti, in his mind, he always had to come out on top. He could never be a loser, never. So it was very hard to negotiate and do anything. You had to make him think that he won, even if you were winning. It was the only way to get around and get something out of him. So you had to kind of have that mentality going in with him. But it was very difficult to deal with in that regard. I respected him because he made no bones about who he was. Yeah, I'm a gangster, I'm a mobster, I love this thing, that's all I am, and that's all I ever want to be.
And he was public about it.
Yeah, he was public about it, and that was it. You know, people say he destroyed the life. He didn't destroy the life, you know, I mean, we all destroyed the life, you know. The government just one-upped us with their technology, with the laws, with the informants they had.
I remember reading this where you said, when you went to prison, they didn't bother you. When he went to prison, he got bullied in prison.
My father taught me something. He said, Mike, when you go into prison, remember 3 things, 3 words that are going to make you have an easy go of it with other guys. Remember to say, please, thank you, and excuse me. You know, because you bump into somebody, excuse me. You know, you ask somebody, please, may I have this? You don't cut in front of people on the line, because so many guys, rather, I should say, that got no respect on the street, want to get all the respect in there because they're putting on a show for everybody else. So little silly things become major things. Got it. So you can't throw your weight around. Now, you can't take any nonsense, but you know, people have to understand, you may be the silent type, but don't mess with me, and I'm not going to disrespect you, don't disrespect me. And John carried himself differently, paid the price. And I know a few guys that did that, so.
Business. You wrote this book, I'll Make You an Offer You Can't Refuse. When I read books, you know, I'll leave my mark and write down. I made so many marks in this that was just, and it's a small book, and I'm amazed. I will tell you, if you haven't read this book, you have to read this book. It was in '09, which social media wasn't around. I hope we can make this book become a phenomenon, because I think every entrepreneur, salesperson, leader must read this book. So make a list of it. We'll put a link on the bottom for you to get as well. You linked it between business and the mafia life that you went through, and you talked a lot of different parts of it. Tell me about the sit down, which was obviously very big in the business you were in. And sit down to us, maybe we go into a boardroom and you know, we're sitting and negotiating with our investors or you know advisory board, whatever it is. How was sit down like for you guys?
Well, it was the basis or the format in which we resolved everything. I mean, anytime we had to resolve a business dispute, something more serious, we did it at a sit down. That's what we called it. It's funny because my publisher, after they read that chapter, they don't have any more meetings. They have sit downs now. You know, the whole place is a sit down. These were high level, very sophisticated meetings, believe it or not. And we had certain rules. You know, if you're a made guy and you're at a sit down, you had to be respectful, no matter what the situation was. In other words, if I'm a made guy and I'm arguing something and I'm lying and you know I'm lying, you can't call me a liar. If you call me a liar, you lose the argument automatically. You have to figure out a way to make people know that you're wrong, that this guy is wrong and I'm right. And the old timers were very tactful at this. You know, they would try to get you into a trap where you would just say something and you're done. It's all over. So you had to really learn how to respectfully get your point across, and you had to know the mentality of the personality of the person going in, or you don't defeat them. These old timers were smart. You know, they were cagey. I had so many of these because it was like every day in my life when I was in the gas business, I had somebody trying to take over, somebody trying to get in. Because, you know, in New York, there's a lot of us. And we were constantly engaging with one another on different matters. And I had a big crew, so the guys in my crew got in trouble. I had to sit down with other people. It was constant way of business. So you learn how to carry yourself there. And it really helped me in my negotiation skills in business. It really helped because going in, I would figure out what I wanted, what I would settle for, and I would keep, you know, I learned one thing. It's always great to let the other person talk. Let them talk. Let them just keep talking. Throw out a word that gets him a little bit and he'll talk more. And as he's talking, you can kind of figure out his mentality, his personality, what you can get out of him, what you can't get out of him. And it helped me a lot in negotiating deals later on. And you know, sometimes you may be the smartest person in the room and you don't want anybody to know that. You just want to keep quiet like you don't know anything and let them think they're smarter than you.
Interesting.
And there's other times when you're not the smartest person in the room, but you want people to think you are. So you have to learn how to have that skill.
Were you a big reader? Because what you just said is art of war, right? So, you know, when you're strong, you know, you got to show that you're weak. When you're weak, you got to act strong. So were you one that's, I mean, obviously you read Machiavelli, Prince, that was kind of the Bible for the family, right? But were you always reading?
No, I wasn't a big reader, honestly. I became a reader in prison because I have a lot to do. But no, it's just something I developed, I think, along the way. One real talent that helped me, or skill, or two. Number one, I recognized a good deal because I got a lot of stuff thrown at me. And I recognized what was good and what wasn't going to work. And that's important because you can waste your time with stuff all day long. And secondly was, I always say, I knew how to put the right people in the right place and get them and motivated them to do the work properly. My mantra always was at that time, do what you do best and delegate the rest. And then make sure they do the job. And that always worked for me until today. You know, there's things that I'm just not good at and I don't even try to do them. I don't even want to be bothered with it, but I'll get somebody that's going to do them
So you had a whole
lot
team
better
around
than
you,
me.
obviously,
Oh
helping
yeah,
you out.
yeah, had to.
So who was the best guy you saw at a sit down? Were you, every time you went there and you knew he was going to be at the sit down, you either learned a lot from him or you knew this was not going to be an easy one?
Yeah, well, Gotti was tough. I mean, you know, you knew going in, you had to just outsmart him and let him think he won, but you get out of there with what you want. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, I had to deal with him. Long story short, it may sound silly, but it wasn't at the time. We had a big flea market, a swap meet, and there were two partners there. One of them was an accountant, legitimate guy, and he was my guy. And there was another guy that he was partners with that was kind of a street guy, and they couldn't get along. And the kid was stealing out of the market, so the guy came to me, so I threw the kid out of the market. I said, you can't come back, you're done. We're taking it over. Well, he runs to John. And John says, he gets in touch with me. He says, Mike, this kid belongs to me and half the market is mine. I said, John, the guy didn't even know who you were. He ran to you, now all of a sudden you know him your whole life, you know? That's what happens in that life. So I have a big sit down and we can't get along. And I said, I told my guy, I said, you're never gonna get along with this guy and I'm never gonna get along with John in this market. I said, so we have to do something. Either we're gonna buy him out or he's gonna buy us out. So I knew at the time that he would never stand for me buying him out. Never.
Pride.
Yeah, pride. So I had to have him buy me out. But if I told him to buy me out, he wouldn't buy me out. So I went in there and we sat down. I said, John, I'm buying you out. And the first words, it's like I knew, you don't buy me out, I buy you out. I said, no, I'm buying you. We went back and forth. Finally, I gave in. I said, all right, buy me out, you know. So he buys me out. You know, we get out, we share the money or whatever. 3 months later, the market went down. He closed it because I knew what they were going to do. Now, who got the better end of the deal? I don't know, because I know what I got. Who knows how much he got when he busted the market out. But it worked out better that way. But, you know, he thought he won. You know, he could tell everybody he got me out of the market. Meanwhile, I got what I wanted. So that's how you had to deal with him.
Very interesting. Anybody else that was very good in the sit down that was a different approach than him?
You know, I sat down with Castellano. He was rough. You know, he was more business, but you know, he's a boss, so he can throw his weight around a little bit more, and you had to be mindful of that, you know. But you had to be respectful and just hold your ground, you know. But he was good. He was really good. I sat down with Fat Tony Salerno, who was the boss of the Genovese family. I liked Tony a lot. You know, I really liked him, really respected him. He was very good. The old timers were good. The younger guys, not so much. But, you know, I had an advantage. I mean, I always had my father, you know, early on was my mentor, so he kind of gave me clues as to how to go in and win, and he was good.
35, it's like you were the LeBron James of the era, right? I mean, you were the youngest guy. I mean, it's 11 years is the difference to the second youngest guy, and that's Gotti, and you're doing it at 35, sitting with these powerful guys negotiating. Michael, how was compensation figured out? Okay, 40 cents, I'm bringing 500 million gallons, 6 to 8 million a week. How is the money spread? So the soldiers, you know, and then you got, how was that spread? Was there a arrangement that was, everyone knew how the numbers would be, it's 10% here or 5% here, 20% here, or would everything vary and nothing was really a steady number that would always be there?
I had my own formula, and I discussed it with my father, and we came to this conclusion. If it was a legitimate deal, I didn't have to give anybody anything. was my deal. Like I had a couple of automobile dealerships, I had a movie car, I had a lot of stuff legitimately. That was mine.
So if you started and nobody else helped you start, it's 100% yours.
It's mine.
And you don't have to share any of it.
No, unless I took them in as a partner,
Got
and
it.
they gave me money or
Got
whatever. No, it was totally mine.
Got
So
it.
my legit stuff was mine. The street stuff was different. Like when I first got involved with the gas business and I knew what I had, I went and see my boss. I sat down with him, I said, Junior, I'm onto something, it's Persico. I said, I'm gonna show you more money than you ever seen before. And he said, we don't do drugs. I said, it's not drugs, you know I'm not into that. I said, I'm into the gas business. I said, but here's the deal. I don't need you to do anything, but when other families learn of what we have, everybody's gonna wanna get involved. I said, as soon as that happens, we're gonna blow it. I said, you gotta keep this within the family. I said, if we have an argument, you gotta make me win. You gotta make me win. Don't play politics, nothing. You do that for me, and I'll show you more money than you ever saw before. And he said, show me. And I'm starting to bring him every week. All he had to do was sit back. I didn't ask him for anything, right? But every time we had a sit down, I had to win. Now I'm bringing him $2 million a week. That buys a lot of loyalty. And my formula was, if I brought the deal in and I didn't need anything from you, you got 25% of anything. 25% goes back to the family.
Got it.
If I needed you in some way, like I had to have money from you or whatever, that was different. Then we maybe you're my full partner.
So the
Everything was
override
different.
was a 25% override.
25%,
Wow.
that was my deal.
That's it.
And I was a captain, so there was nobody between me and
Got
him. So I gave it to him. Like if I was a soldier, I'd have to give it to my captain then would give it to him, and they'd work it out.
Once you're a captain, you only report up, right? There's
Report
nobody else
directly
between.
to the boss.
You talked about consigliere, right? Counselor. I can tell you, I am where I'm at right now because I've had some amazing advisors in my life. I can't even, we were talking about Dudley earlier, we were talking about certain, Tom and some of these other guys that have affected my life. How do you know who is a consigliere where you can open up with? Like in your world, that's a big part of your life and your business. So how do you identify one, and when do you know this is going to be the guy that I'm going to go to?
The consigliere is an official position in our life. There is a
For every
consigliere.
made man or for?
There's one consigliere in every family. And the consigliere, his official position is that he is the liaison between the men and the boss. In other words, in that life we're told this, everybody is equal. You may be the boss, but you're still equal. You don't have better rights than the soldier. We're all made guys, we're all equal. You just happen to have a different position. You're in control, but we're equal. You can't violate a soldier's rights either. So if a soldier has a problem, maybe with the boss or something, he's supposed to go to the consigliere, and the consigliere straightens it out with the boss. That's in theory how it is. In practice, it doesn't work that way because the boss appoints the consigliere. And if you have a problem with the boss and you go to the consigliere, you're probably going to get killed or get in trouble.
Got it.
So you never said anything to the consigliere. It was kind of a nonsense position, And usually it was a guy that the boss respected that he would run things off of, and they'd discuss things together and figure out what they have to do in any situation. You didn't have an individual consigliere, but the guy that I trusted the most and talked with was my dad. If I had something that I thought I needed advice with, I talked to my dad.
It was immediate, yeah.
That was it. It's good to have that one person there that you could go to and say, look, especially my dad, because he knew the life so well.
What made a very good consigliere? So if you were to say, here's what makes a very good consigliere, what would you say it was?
Wisdom. He had to know the life. He had to have good discernment, on how to figure things out. He should be a cool-tempered guy, and he should be sincere, and not have his own personal agenda. That's important. But that's rare. I'm telling you, it's rare in that life. There's so much politics that goes on there. You really had to be careful.
What was the benefit of being a consigliere?
It's a high position. The underboss and the consigliere were kind of equal. Really?
Wow, so that much of a respected position. So let's transition to human nature. What were some of the things that you learned where you would go and have a sit down or you'd meet with people and you would say, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this guy. I don't know if I trust this guy. I feel comfortable trusting this guy. Was there a methodology that you eventually put together or was it still an intuition type of thing when you were reading people?
It was more intuitive, I would say, because everybody was so different. And obviously, if you had experience with somebody more than once, then you know, all right, I know what I'm in for with this guy. But it was more intuitive, because again, with me, I had so many, with so many different people, and I pretty well knew, when you start to get some experience in that life, you know right away, when somebody's out to get you, and so to speak, they're looking to, not make things turn out for you well. You just deal with it.
Because I would assume probably a person who ends up becoming a boss in that world, you have to be very good in human nature. You got to be able to figure it out and see who's, even if you have a sit-down, you're sitting there, you're looking at this guy saying, that guy's not on my side, this guy's on my side, that guy's in the middle, this guy. There was a lot of that probably going on all the time.
Yeah, the problem though, Patrick, with that life, that life is it's like a wheel turning around. And the guy that's on the bottom today can end up being on the top tomorrow. And you always had to be mindful of that. So, for instance, in Gotti's case, he could have had a soldier close to him that was a nobody, really. And then all of a sudden, Gotti's the boss, and now this guy becomes somebody. So a guy that you didn't have much respect for, now you better respect him.
Got it.
So because of that, you always tried to treat people the right way. Yeah, because you never know, where that guy's going to be the next day or the next week, and then he's got it in for you, and then you got a problem.
That is very interesting when you think about that, because that guy comes up, the influence is going to be with him, right? So let's transition into some interesting characters. So Rudy Giuliani, right? He's coming up, right, and he wants to clean house, is what he wants to do. Rudy says, a guy who wrote a book, Man of Honor?
Man of Honor.
Man of Honor. Who is the person?
Bonanno.
Okay, so he writes the book, and then he gives the blueprint to them to know what the RICO game was, and he puts that together, and they had the best FBI agent at that time, some guy named Lindley or Lynn, that he knew how to go and create informants, and he goes and figures out with the Green Reaper, the Scarpa, I think. So is that really truth to that, or is that more? Okay,
I don't believe any of that. I mean, Giuliani says that the reason he had a position in Washington, D.C. in the Department of Justice, and his story was that Joe Bonanno wrote this book, and he, being an Italian-American, Giuliani, was so insulted by this book because he made the Mafia out to be like a family, like it was a very legitimate, great thing. And he was so insulted by it, Giuliani, that he had to clean house because of it. And that's why he came to New York and became the U.S. attorney there, so he could attack the mob and clean house. I don't know if I believe that. I think he was an opportunistic guy, and being a U.S. attorney in Manhattan is an extremely prestigious position. And he picked our guys to go after and build his career at that point in time. And he did a great job of it. I mean, let's face it.
He has that reputation till today,
I mean, he was very capable at what he did. The racketeering, the RICO statute, had been on the books for over 10 years when Rudy came in, but nobody ever used it. He learned, or he saw how to use it effectively, and he started using it against us, and it was designed to be used against us, but nobody ever did it. And it's an extremely difficult law to navigate around. I mean, I had 3 RICO indictments. To me, I think it's an unconstitutional law, but it's a law. Nevertheless, it's on the books, so you live with it. But he just was determined to make his name on us guys, and he did.
Did you ever have a one-on-one run-in with him?
I had one. Well, in the courtroom, the day I was, he indicted me on a big RICO case. And the day of my arraignment, he was giving me bail, and he came up to me and he said, Franzese, if I convict you on this case, I'm going to give you double what your father got. You're going to get 100 years. And that's the kind of time they were giving. Told me straight out. And I said, Rudy, I beat you guys 3 times already. Let's go for round 4. I told him, I was kind of arrogant back then. But, I was on trial for several months, and I was the lead defendant, and I was acquitted in that case. Some of my co-defendants are convicted. I got 30 years. So I would have probably got at least 50 if I lose that case. So to say that I won that case was a blessing is an understatement.
Wow.
I'd still be in prison.
Wow. What do you think about Rudy today? What do you think, like when you see Rudy today on TV? I mean, I saw news was on. So when you watch TV and you see him, how do you look at him when
I'm okay with him. I mean, it's not personal. I actually saw him one time. He actually he said some good things about me later on. Because when I was walking away from that life, most of the people in government said, it's a fraud, he's not really walking away, and he's pulling a scam over the government like he did in the gas business. Everybody said that. But Rudy said, you know what? He's a pretty smart guy, and he knows his life is on the run, and I think his walking away may be genuine. He said that early on.
What year was it? Was it in the 90s?
Yeah, it was in the early 90s, I think, when that. Yeah, he came in, he said that.
Very interesting for him to say that.
But listen, he's a very capable guy. No question about it. I will tell you this, I thought he was a great mayor in New York.
Yeah.
I really did. He did a lot for that city, without a doubt. So, I mean, I can't knock his, his abilities. He was good at what he did.
He says a big part of it was something about his dad, and his dad said, we can't be bullied in New York, and that was his inspiration, which I'm like, wow, what a thing to remember for your dad to instill, that you get that much drive to want to go against the 5 families. That's got to be a chip on his shoulder to want to do something like that.
I mean, it's a good narrative. But if you're going to make your name in New York, you're going to make it 2 ways. You're going after Wall Street or you're going after the mob. That's it. And he chose both. Let's face it. I mean, he got Boesky and he got, what's his name, the other big guy, I forget, Milken. He got Milken, and he got us. He got us all. So, I mean, but I'll tell you what, I owe a lot to him, and he doesn't even realize this. When I was on trial, Rizzo, my gas business partner, had become an informant. They were creating the case against me in the gas business, and Rizzo was the star witness. Well, when Giuliani found out that they had this big witness against me, and I was on trial, he wanted that witness to testify against me. The problem was Rizzo didn't really know anything about that case, but there was a big dispute, I found out afterwards, between the Eastern District and Giuliani over getting Rizzo to testify, because the Eastern District didn't want to give him up. That was their guy. You know how it is, the government. Anyhow, Giuliani's got a lot of juice, he wins. We put Rizzo on the stand, okay? And we crucify him up there, destroyed him on the stand, okay? Jury didn't believe him, I get acquitted. What happens now? Now the government is scared because I just beat their main witness against me in the gas case. They're ready to throw him out of the witness protection program.
Wow.
That's what gave me the leverage to negotiate the deal that I got, because they were afraid I was going to beat him again, because I had won 4 cases now. I know they called John the Teflon Don, but I've won 4 cases too. And the Giuliani case was a big loss for them. And if you look back, that was the only case that ended up in an acquittal. He convicted everybody. We were the only ones where there was an acquittal. So that gave me the leverage to go in and make the deal in the Eastern District and only get 10 years. Because that was a bonus back then, only get 10 years. They were giving everybody 50 and 100.
You got 10?
I got 10.
That's amazing compared to some of the other stories you hear about.
I'll tell you this, I believe if Rizzo didn't testify in the Giuliani case and I beat him, they wouldn't have made the deal with me. They would have taken me to trial, because it was the gas business. They figured they had me.
Wow.
And they were going to put me away forever, but they got scared.
How much would you have gone? 35, 50?
Oh, easy. 50 minimum.
Really?
Yeah. Patrick, they were giving guys 100, 150 years.
Wow.
And I'm saying, I'm the youngest out of all of these
and
guys.
You're not
They're going to give me 300 years.
That's unbelievable.
They would have crucified me. When you have time to think and really analyze the way life goes, and you look back and I said, man, all these negatives turned into a positive for me. They gave me breaks that I didn't realize were happening at that time. That's a big part of my faith when I talk to people. I said, the misery that you're going through now might be the blessing for you later on. I said, it happened in my life in more than one situation. My father, betraying me, that later broke that tie that got me out of that life. Because everybody I know, either dead or in prison for the rest of their life. Everybody. So how was I going to walk away? I had a major bullseye on my back. They weren't going to let me go. No way.
That is an unbelievable story right there, Mike. By itself, that's an unbelievable story. So Rudy Giuliani, what would be fun? It'd be fun to be at a sit down with you, Rudy, and just hearing the conversations now. You're
I would
related.
love that.
Huh?
I would love it. I would rub it in.
I would love to see it.
First thing I'd tell Rudy, I'm the only guy to beat you. You know that, right? I'd start it off like that, put him right on the defensive.
So some characters, a couple characters that I'm curious about if you ever had a run-in with. Did you ever have any business with Roy Cohn?
I did.
How was his personality? Because you hear Roy Cohn, the influence with Trump, and he was working with the five families, and everybody trusted him because he wasn't leaking any information to anybody. The story that he had in the court many years ago that you read about all the time. So, how was Roy Cohn?
He was respected. But I'll tell you my major Roy Cohn incident. I get indicted in the Giuliani case. Roy reaches out to me. Go to his office, I go see him. He said, I heard about the case. He says, I can get your indictment squashed. Now, Patrick, nobody gets an indictment squashed, not in the federal level, not when you're a target like me. I said, okay. I said, what do you want? He said, I want 250 grand. He says, and I'll make it go away. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I'm calculating, I gotta go to trial, this and that, and I lose, I'm gonna go. I said, I'll put $1 million in escrow, okay? When the indictment is squashed, take the whole $1 million. Because I knew it wasn't gonna happen. He said, well, it doesn't work that way. I said, well, that's how I work it. I said, I'm giving you 4 times the money. I said, I'm putting it in escrow, take it, squash the indictment, you got it. That was the end of that. He's trying to beat me.
Yeah.
Because then they come up with another excuse.
That's right.
Let me tell you, we never trusted our lawyers. Never trust. Even the ones we loved, we hated.
Well, Gotti apparently had a great lawyer, but
Bruce Cutler.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, Bruce Cutler. I knew Bruce well.
Was he? So he also, people didn't trust him either.
You trust him to a point.
Right, because it's money. It's my fees per hour and the whole.
You never, ever admitted to your lawyer, no matter how much you trust him, that you were guilty.
Was Roy trusted?
No.
Really?
No.
Seriously?
He was let me tell you something about their life, and I don't mean this to be offensive.
Wow.
Anybody that wasn't a made guy, it could have been the President of the United States or the Pope. If you're not a made guy, you're a sucker. Everybody was on the same level. And Roy Cohn, if you could use him, you used him. But did we trust him? Hell no. Bruce Cutler, we use him, everything else, but you don't trust them 100%.
That makes sense.
I mean, that's just the way we dealt with them.
That makes sense. So was Joey Gallo really the guy that that killed Joe? Joey Gallo was the guy that did it. Was it validated?
It wasn't him personally.
Of course, he had the.
Yeah, but he was behind that. Yeah.
That was verified. Everybody knew that 100%. That was the case. Was Nicky Black as feared of a man as they paint him out to be?
No.
Okay.
No. I got along well with Nicky. I'll tell you one story though. I went into his, he had a bar, and he was a brutal guy, I gotta tell you. And some guy owed him money, and I went in the back with him. He said, Nick, Mike, come over here. And he was breaking the guy's hands and everything like that, because the guy owed him money, and I said, Nicky, come on, man. I said, how's the guy gonna pay you if you break his hands? You can't even go to work, But no, he wasn't. You got to understand something too, Patrick. John Gotti was feared by everybody. John talked a lot, but we all were capable of doing what we had to do. We were only in fear if we did something wrong, and we knew we had to be afraid. But because you throw your chest out, you're no more capable than I am. In other words, if I got an order to kill you, I'm going to kill you. I don't care who you are. I have to. Otherwise, my life is at stake. So we didn't fear people in that way. But, there's people you don't want to cross. Like Junior, my boss, he was a treacherous guy. I don't want to cross him because I don't know what's going to happen.
Was he that bad? I mean,
Junior
the stuff you read about him is like...
They call him the Snake. I mean, he was a treacherous guy. I mean, I liked him, don't get me wrong. I got along with him, but I knew not to mess with him. So we all had that kind of a fear. You know what I mean? Don't mess, because you may walk in a room and not walk out.
What made Capone special? That in the community, was it anything significant that? Because they put you and Capone in the same league for the most money made, right? So.
Well, listen, what they always said, and I believe it to be, that the gas business was the most money that we had seen since the days of Prohibition. Now, we're not adjusting for inflation.
Sure.
But, so, I mean, he was an earner. He caught it lucky, like I did, I guess. You know, I found the gas tax. At that time, there was prohibition, and he found the right deal, and he was able to capitalize on it, so.
When it comes down to sports, do you think, you know, the whole Pete Rose story and all these things you hear about, back in the days, okay, you think a lot of it still happens today?
As far as?
As far as, hey, make sure you don't win by 11, you know, make sure you know, don't pitch the game like this. You do this. I know it happens a lot in a high school and a college level. Do you think it still happens at the highest level?
In the pros, I don't believe so,
Okay.
because the salaries now that these guys make, you know, they can afford to lose. They'll pay their bets. They'll pay their debts, you know. Back in my day, it was a different story. You know, I had bookmakers working for me, and we had a lot of athletes gambling with us. And I remember bookmakers calling me up, hey, Mike, so-and-so is into me for 25 grand. Should I cut him off? I said, why would you cut him off? All you're doing is writing an entry on a piece of paper. I said, get leverage. Let him get into you for 250 grand, and then bring him to me. The higher the loss, the more leverage you got over the guy, you know? Because they didn't have that kind of money back then. Now, 250 grand, they're paid off. What's the big deal?
Nothing.
You know? No. I mean, look, Michael Jordan is a legendary, degenerate gambler, and I'm not calling him personally. I'm just calling his gambling habit.
Sure, yeah.
The guy can lose $1 million a week and wouldn't faze him.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean,
And there's some controversy behind him with the whole, what happened to his dad.
Yeah.
You remember that whole thing about was it not, and Stern told him to step away. But I mean, I don't know the story behind it. But
I definitely believe, because I was working with the NBA at that point in time, and they told him to get away. And that's when
you definitely believe that.
100% I believe that. And he went and played baseball for a year just to let things die down. And then he came back, you know, yeah. I mean, that was the inside talk at that time.
I read both sides, and I'm like, you know, it's kind of convincing. I just don't know for me to say that. But you hear some high credible sources saying that, you know, that this took place. Last few things here before we wrap up. So you got a new project coming up. I literally got an email a week ago. It says, hey, did you know Michael got casted for a movie with Tom Hanks and, you know, with Katarina Radivojevic from, you know, Croatia, or, you know, the movie's going to be in Croatia. It's a $50 million budget. How did this all of a sudden happen?
You know, I had a role in a movie recently called Let There Be Light with Kevin Sorbo. And the long story short, how that happened, the writer is a good friend of mine. He wrote me into and then he said, Mike, I want you to play the part. I had no intention of doing it, but I ended up doing it. It was an ex-mob guy who became a pastor. Big stretch, big stretch for me, right? So I was basically playing myself. But, you know, I'm involved with a fellow by the name of Tom Creole. And Tom is, he goes after black money. Black money meaning money that's used to finance terrorist groups, and money that's used to go after Christian, you know, martyrs. I mean, to martyr Christians. And he and I are kind of working together. And he created a game rather, called oh gosh, I forget, Eva something, the game, right? And they're creating a movie out of the game. And I think they spoke to Tom Hanks, and he wants to be in it. Let me tell you about this movie. It's an early project, so who knows if it'll ever come to pass. But yes, they want me to play the role, and I said, look, because of the cause, I'll be involved with it. I'm not an actor. I don't intend to be an actor, but I guess if the right thing comes up and it works for you, you do it.
So I do know that you had some experience with movies in the past, that you know, had somebody that worked with you, that, you know, you funded some movies, $250,000 that led to another $500,000. So there's some stories there, but what are you working on nowadays? What are some projects you're working on nowadays?
A couple of things that are real exciting. My main project right now is I'm doing a stage show in Las Vegas. And it's the history of the mob in Las Vegas set to music and dance. It's a musical.
Wow.
And we're telling the whole history of the mob from the 1950s, okay, when they got involved and actually created Vegas, right through the 80s when they kind of were pushed out. And I'm going to narrate it actually on stage, and a little bit of my story is going to be interspersed in that, the way we've designed it. But it's a really cool project. I'm very excited about it. It's going to appear at the Plaza downtown. We have a marketing arrangement with the Mob Museum. That's a big museum downtown in Vegas. I have a relationship with them there. And it's going to premiere in May of next year. So I have that. And I've got 2 television projects. One is a scripted series called American Royalty, and that is the history of the mob in New York from the 50s right through the mid-70s. And we're going to tell the story of the 5 families, and I'm really excited about the project because I'm with a great company, and they put together a great showrunner and writer who's got tremendous credits, and I think that's going to go next year. And then I'm doing a true crime unscripted show that's called A Mafia Democracy. And basically, the theme of the show is that we're going to highlight cases where the government was complicit in framing somebody. And we're going to be holding the government accountable in cases like that. The first case that we're going to highlight in the first season is my father's case.
Wow.
We're going to tell that whole story.
Unbelievable.
In 6 episodes.
Does he know about it?
He does. And I said to him, Dad, for 50 years you've been complaining that you've been framed. I believe you, a lot of people believe you, but you never want to talk about it on camera. I said, I'm going to do this show. I said, but you have to get on camera, and all you have to say is, I was framed. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you got to cooperate. You know what he says to me? He's, let me ask my lawyer. I said, Dad, you don't have a lawyer. I gave you a lawyer. I said, your lawyer's going to say yes, so you got to commit to me that you're going to do it. So he committed. He said, yes, I'll do
cool.
it. He's never been on camera. My dad has never said a word to the press, has never been interviewed, so this will be the first time. The oldest made guy in America, okay, is finally going to be on camera and say some things. And I said, you don't have to admit who you are, what you did, or what you were involved in. I'm going to get him to do that anyway. But yeah, he's agreed. I think it's important. You know, again, I want people to understand, I'm not anti-government. I'm not anti-law enforcement. I have many friends in law enforcement. I have brothers in Christ in enforcement. And I tell people, I have 5 daughters. When they walk down the street, I expect law enforcement to protect them.
Yeah.
I'm a friend to law enforcement. But what I don't like is when they go rogue and they frame people and they put people away and they destroy lives. They have enough weapons and tools to play by the rules and go and get people the right way. And most good people in law enforcement feel the same way. So I'm not going against them. But to me, it's an exciting series. It's kind of like, John Walsh in America's Most Wanted. He had a personal stake in this, and I'm going to host that series. It looks like they want me to do that, and hopefully that'll be a success and it'll have the right impact. And I'll be honest with you, Patrick, I don't think there's ever been a time in my lifetime where a show like this would be more relevant.
Than today.
The feeling with government is not great today.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And you kind of talked about it in the end of your book. If there's anything I would say, when you buy the book, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. The last chapter really gets into your beliefs about the government and politics and all that, which I think it's very fascinating. Maybe we can talk about that on another time. But guys, again, if you haven't read the book, go buy the book. We'll put a link on the bottom. Michael, thank you so much for opening your home to us.
Patrick.
Appreciate your time.
It.
Thank you.
Thank you.